My name is David Gregson. I'm the co-founder of Be Well, and I've been very privileged to spend nearly an hour with John Rowlands, Executive Principal of Greater Manchester Academies Trust, and his colleague Sue Watmough, Head Teacher of Manchester Communication Academy, part of the selfsame trust. Our interview was packed with insights from running a trust and a school in today's Britain, and for those of you who wish to do so, you can find the full interview elsewhere. But for those of you with less time, we thought it might be helpful to cut the interview into shorter segments. And this is what this podcast does. First of all, I asked John and Sue the importance of why they do what they do in the way that they do it. And the first one to answer that question was John.
So our why is absolutely in the importance of wellbeing across our school community is fundamental. And since COVID, we've actually seen this exemplified with the emergence of, increased mental health concerns and issues that children have. Many of the answers to some of the issues that we have within our schools currently across the country can be improved by a real strategic approach to what we mean by well-being within our schools.
Well, gosh. And Sue, you already described that you came from a focus on well-being in your prior role. Would you add anything to what John's just said from your own perspective?
I think for my why, when we talk as a family, if our children are upset at home or anything, we come back to some simple questions, and it's just, are you safe? Are you happy? Are you warm? And are you loved? And I think those questions should permeate through education too. That's ultimately what everybody wants for their children. And how can I expect a child to come in and complete a maths test or perform a drama showcase if they've not had a hot meal last night, if they've had an unsettled night's sleep? The well-being of that child has to be paramount so that we've got the platform to then build excellent academic performance on. The two aren't mutually exclusive. We can't look at well-being through one lens and academic performance through another. Without well-being, we're not going to get the academic success. So it's crucial that school leaders place as much emphasis on happiness and health and well-being as they do academic prowess.
Next, I asked Sue about the responses that she and her team had undertaken to the Be Well results that were provided privately, as with all other schools, to her and her team. Notably, as you'll hear, drilling down into different groups and cohorts of students because of the richness of the Be Well data.
Yeah, the response to the Be Well survey wasn't mainly around nutrition or physical activity, because we do really well there, to be honest with you.
Right.
The children have an amazing curriculum offer. They all cook every week. We ensure that they have ingredients that we provide. They can take those meals home. So we know that we're doing well there. We know that our students are physically active. We know that we're providing opportunities through active travel, through morning, lunchtime, break time, after school sessions. So we know that from a physical activity and from a nutrition perspective that we're doing well. But it showed us things that we couldn't see. So where we feel we always listen to students, and we do, but it allows us some real precise insights. So being able to drill down into different student groups showed us that some of those post-16 aspirations for our white British free school meal students weren't what we would have hoped, or as it was for other groups of students. So again, that has then informed the leadership actions that we've taken for that year group immediately through our post-16 strategy.
There followed a fascinating series of areas that we covered. First of all, I asked John and then Sue about the school's most recent Ofsted inspection visit, which took place in the summer of 2024. Not only as to how Be Well played a role in that, but also, as you'll hear, what appears to be a slightly different approach from Ofsted to the inspection regime and the way they approach it. This led on to a discussion on the benefits of national wellbeing measurement, the implications for accountability in the school system, and the importance of contextual data when thinking about how effectively a system is operating. First to answer was Sue.
I 100% used the Be Well survey and the Be Well results in my discussions with Ofsted inspectors when we were discussing the health and wellbeing curriculum or our post-16 offer or our personal development strategy. We were able to evidence the impact of that work through those Be Well results. So I didn't just talk to them about it, I physically got the results out and showed them our outcomes compared to other schools across Greater Manchester, but also again linking that to the leadership decisions that have been taken and the impact of the implementation of that.
And Ofsted visits are often characterised as looking very much more at the academic attainment side of things, the curriculum, the quality of the teaching and so on. What was the reaction of Ofsted, the inspectors that came to visit you, to what you've just described? Was this something that they asked you for, or did you offer up, here's Be Well, and this is how we've reacted to it?
What was really interesting about this Ofsted inspection was that the inspectors were more attentive, and they've only got a finite period of time with you where they have to ask certain questions and gain certain evidence to formulate their judgments, and I understand that. But what was really helpful, after each session, they asked the question, is there anything else you wanted to share, or is there anything else you want to say? And I quite happily said, yes, I feel I've got more to tell you here, and I've got more to show you. So then we arranged follow-up sessions where I got presentations out, I got the funnel graphs out, I got the data out and said, look, this is showing you as leaders what we're doing to support this community that faces such inequalities. And this is also part of the story of how we're delivering the outcomes that you're evaluating.
I think it really framed the narrative for us, and in a way that previous inspections you've not necessarily been able to. There, in your hands, you've got impact. And when an inspection team come in, you know, they're looking at your impact, they're looking at the results. And we found a real sea change in the approach this time with the inspection team, where they listened to us and the inspection sort of maneuvered through in a way that we were able to dictate. And first and foremost, the safety and well-being of our children is paramount to everything that we do. And they really understood that. But we were also, through the Be Well survey, able to give them results that exemplified that. So we weren't just talking about a curriculum that weaves through, that supports children through PSHE or developing a sense of belonging from primary to secondary school. We were able to shape that narrative with them, which shows we do this. You may say, so what? Well, here's the so what of it. And we were able to put in the hand the difference it's making to our children. And the power of that really supported us through that inspection process.
Perhaps this is one for you, John. There are increasing calls for national measurement of young people's well-being across the country. We've had the Fair Education Alliance, the Children's Society, and there's a report coming out tomorrow from Pro Bono Economics, all calling for this. Based on your experience, what would be your view on these increasing calls of the new government to adopt wellbeing measurement across the country?
Yeah, I think used wisely, it can have a significant impact on the work of school leaders within our schools in order to, promote the well-being of our children. I think what we found within that study across Greater Manchester with 200 schools is a powerful voice between us all, but you need that power within it, because then you can look at norms, you can look at changes, and you can track that, and you can identify at what point there are key changes.
There is some concern when it comes to national wellbeing measurement that this will lead to greater accountability within the school system for the wellbeing of young people, when a lot of the issues that they confront, such as sofa surfing that you've described, are not within the control of schools. Does that affect your judgment as to the wisdom of adopting a wellbeing measurement across the country?
No, because I believe we should invert that. And my answer, the first two words I think are used, was used wisely. So we're quite happy that there seems to be a slight change in Ofsted approach for the future, whereby things like single word judgment, you know, have immediately gone, but there's perhaps more of a focus on inclusion within the inspection framework moving forwards. So let's see this as an opportunity. We can use that as a measure to look at the impact that schools can have to really drive this agenda. You're right. I would question that if it became another stick to beat schools with, if it wasn't where it needs to be. However, we can be empowered enough to look at what our approach is to be able to show that demonstrable difference that this can make to children's lives throughout their schooling. And how powerful would that be for us all?
Well, that's a lovely answer. And Sue, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, can I tell you what I find the lunacy in some of this is
Yes.
that why we think we're held to account for a child's academic performance, but why we think that sofa surfing the night before isn't going to impact on their academic performance when that's out of our control. Yeah, hang on, let's not do it for well-being because that's out of our control. It's all of those aspects are out of our control, and they all impact the young person at school. So yes, it's out of our control, but it impacts other aspects of their school life as well. And if we're held to account for those, then why not for their well-being too? But I want to be really careful with this because I say held to account. I don't think we should be held to account for a measure, for a quantitative outcome. I think what I want to see from schools is the recognition of the issues that are facing the children and a response. And I think that's how the wellbeing measure should capture how a school is focusing on children's well-being. So that, and also it depends, again, contextually where your school is. There might be greater health inequalities or wellbeing inequalities, depending on where that school's located. But again, that shouldn't be a stick to beat someone with, oh, this score's really poor for you, but it's great up there, isn't it? Well, obviously, we're not at the same start point. So it's foolish. But what isn't is saying to schools, well, okay, you know this, you've got this intelligence, what are you doing with it? That's what we want to see from schools. What are you doing to ensure that your children are healthy and happy?
The notion perhaps that the wellbeing survey results provide contextual background to the school cohort and the school students that you're serving. And it seems that's very often missing from the way we think about systemic issues in the education system. Does that resonate?
Yeah, I think if we look at the framework for Ofsted, they value things that are absolutely important, but there's no value put on all the layers of support that's hidden to it. And for a school like ours, where we're serving a community, you know, we're really proud to serve, but of, you know, upwards of towards 70% of children who are deemed to be disadvantaged, and we are at odds with that term disadvantaged and what it means. But if that's the case, 70% disadvantage, for us to perform where children are making progress, you know, above the national average and attaining in line with the national average from a very low start, for that to happen, it's not just born out of the classroom. It's around a community approach where actually we have to build our school as a real cathedral within the community. And that's how we've got to place ourselves. And that's where we can bring about real seismic change. And we've got to believe that we can achieve it. And by and large, whilst every day isn't always a blue, shiny sky day, you know, we've gained some success in that. But it has to be on that twin emphasis around high quality teaching and learning and what we can do for social mobility to impact and mitigate against social disadvantage.
And before we go on to the 1 minute question, John and Sue, if you want to as well, as to your wishes for young people in our country, is there anything that we haven't covered in this discussion that you would want to raise?
I think in terms of where we are with this wellbeing strategy, there's a real opportunity. I'm excited by the fact that this can be nationally profiled, and I do feel like the question to ask of that is now. We do have a bit of a sea change. We're seeing that with Ofsted and their approaches to inspections. We are seeing with the removal of certain judgments. And let's face it, you know, schools have been held accountable by a system that's been quite punitive. It looks at certain measurements that are important, but it doesn't have that whole picture. what an opportunity we've got now to really bring the key people to the table and to start thinking differently about what we mean within our schools and what we can do in society to bring about change. And I think for me, whilst the Be Well initiative and strategy has been going on for a number of years now, it's just coming to the point where I think it can bear real fruit for us within our education sector.
Thanks, John. And Sue, would you add anything to that?
Just to say that I think being able to use Be Well as a school leader is really empowering. It can really empower you to make a difference in the right places at the right time. And it can empower you to do things differently. You know, we've got to be brave in this world. We've got to be brave in the education system. And we can only do that if we're informed. But let's not just pay lip service to student voice and student councils. Let's get some real meaty data that we can get under the skin of that can then formulate really effective responses. But let's not just do it in North Manchester. Let's not just do it in Greater Manchester. Let's take this broader, because that we should be asking these questions and we should be demanding to know how we can support the well-being of young people and place as much importance on well-being as we do on English grades, maths grades, and EBAC scores and so on. What does it mean if somebody's grossly unhappy in their life?
And maybe that brings us to the sort of last moment of this fascinating discussion. John, if I were to ask you to summarize in roughly a minute what it is that you would wish for our young people and the system that serves and supports them in the future, what would you draw out?
My wish for children. Wow. What a question that is. I think my wish for children would be that we protect childhood. And I think for too many children within our school system currently, childhood isn't protected. And that could be as a result of food poverty, housing issues, mental health concerns, family issues. So there's a whole societal response there that I think schools can be a real part of the solution. They can't be the only part of the solution. But the wish for me for children would be to protect childhood. And I think we go about that in maybe three core ways. The first is to redefine the purpose of education and look at what we value within our education system and how we hold others to account within that. So do we have well-being as a priority? Could it be more of a priority? Do we need to look at how we nurture individuals more within our schools, how we support children through mental health availability and support? So my first strand would be, let's redefine what we mean in education and value things differently. The second aspect would be around seeing schools as vehicles for change. Schools provide the clearest line of sight for me in terms of the lived reality of our families. And so let's look at the big levers that can support us in really supporting families. So what does that look like for housing policy? What does that look like at local council level? And how can different sectors come together, including big tech and industry, to really bring about change for our young people of today? And the third aspect, and the real key one for me, and if it was Harry Potter, it'd be the thing that I'm sure we would all want to happen, is just to eradicate child poverty, reduce inequity, and redefine what we mean by disadvantage. It's such a simple term to use that. Free school meals is such a simple term. And we have these metrics where schools can show if they're 10% free school meals or 60%. It doesn't tell the story. So let's start understanding what we mean by disadvantage and come up with solutions. And we can do that. But the Be Well strategy gives us some of the information, insight that takes us, for me, a few steps closer in being able to bring about that change.
Well, when I hear you talk, you sound exactly like Harry Potter, I think. So we're absolutely thrilled that we may be able to give you the tools to enable you to bring about that change. Sue, would you add anything to what John has said? Would you like your own minute?
No, I'm going to pass my minute over to a student's voice, if that's okay, because ultimately that's what Be Well's all about.
Yeah.
And not knowing we were going to have this conversation, I was liaising with the head prefects over the summer, and I asked them for 3 wishes. But I framed it in a way that it was a personal wish, a wish for their year group and a wish for the school. And this is Severin's response, who's one of our head prefects, a really articulate young man. And his first response is that his personal wish is to excel, both in his academic progress, but also in his wider contributions to the school, being that of a head prefect. That was his personal wish. The wish for the whole year group was that everybody works as hard as they can and can reach their potential. And his final wish, which actually I think he sandwiched quite a few wishes into one, but he was being clever in how he constructed his wish, was that he wants for the school community, for everyone to work together, to respect one another, and to build a better community and future for all of us.
Oh. My word, if ever there was evidence of the power of listening to young people and their own voice, there it is in 3 statements. That is incredibly powerful, Sue. Thank you so much. Thank you for asking them, and thank you for repeating that just now. Well, I do hope that you have enjoyed listening to this Be Well podcast. I'd like to particularly thank John and Sue for their insights and for all demonstrably the incredible work that they do, both in their school and in their community, to improve the lives of the young people in their care. Until next time.